Now, I had spoken previously when we talked about the fact that you had four candidates running for office in 1824, that three of them were considered, regional sons or whatever phrase you'd like to use. John Quincy Adams was the favorite son of the New England. His father had been vice president. His father had worked on the Constitution and Declaration and had all sorts of things. Plus, his dad had been a one term president. And so I mentioned before there might have been a little bit of John Quincy Adams running for president to try and exorcise the demons that were still there from his dad being the only one-term president in American history up to that point. But while he does win the White House, he is going to face some problems. He's going to be something of a misfit. He's not going to be the guy that really accomplishes everything that he had intended or desired to accomplish. It's not going to work out quite as well as he had hoped that it would. Now, John Quincy Adams was a man of puritanical honor. He was very serious about his word was his bond kind of thing. He had achieved the offices that he had enjoyed, be that president, secretary of state, everything else, by commanding respect rather than boasting great popularity. He was not an individual that was, the people's first choice and everything like that, but he was recognized as an individual that really kept his word, that was honest, was loyal, and things like that. The problem was that he came across a lot like his father. Okay, he was somewhat wooden. He lacked what would be known as the people's touch. He wasn't able to really connect with the people the way somebody like Andrew Jackson was able to do. Andrew Jackson was able to really get a crowd behind him. John Quincy Adams was not the same way. It's not to say that he wasn't a good individual, that he wasn't a good choice for the job or anything like that. It's just saying that there was a difference in management and leadership style between, say, himself and an Andrew Jackson. Now, one of the big areas in which there would be a huge difference between the two is something that would come to be known as patronage. Now, patronage is the idea that if you get elected president, for example, what you do is you go through and you fire everybody who's from a party other than your own and replace them with your people. Now, the problem with that is that you don't always get the best folks for the job. During John Quincy Adams' administration, he removed only 12 public servants from the federal payroll. And as a result, there were those within his own party who wanted those, a lot of these different jobs, but there were a very limited number. He wouldn't kick out efficient office holders just to put his own people in. Now, on the one hand, this is a fantastic example of doing the right thing. You don't go through and you don't try and get rid of people just because of whatever political party they happen to belong to. But at the same time, this was a day and age when that was really the way things were done. And so you can make the argument, on the other hand, that this really ended up hurting John Quincy Adams in the long run. You didn't have the same party loyalty from the people who had wanted the jobs that he refused to free up. So he was an individual that wasn't going to go through and, cost people their jobs just because he thought it might help him politically down the road. He was more interested in making sure people who actually were good at their jobs and were efficient at it, let them keep it. The problem with patronage is very often you end up firing people and putting your own in place, but they end up being lazy or corrupt or just flat out incompetent or all of the above. And as a result, then you end up with a lot more trouble. And the other aspect of patronage is if that's the game you're playing, then as soon as administrations change, all your people get kicked out just as well. So it's a back and forth, and John Quincy Adams wasn't going to play that particular game. As a result, this did end up enduring him to some and causing him grief with others. The Constitution requires that the President from time to time inform the Congress as to the state of the Union. Now, today we know that as the State of the Union Address. But starting off with Thomas Jefferson, this became a written statement to Congress. We understand it today to be a major undertaking where the president will go through and will present to the Congress all the various things that he wishes to accomplish or wishes to get done during the next year or so. Every president has gone through and done this in one way, shape, or form. We have heard promises of late from everything to we're going back to the moon, to we're going to Mars, to we're going to cure cancer, to you pretty much name it, it has been there. And sometimes we will get statements made that are at best far fetched and never going to happen. Sometimes they're far fetched and we accomplish it. In John Quincy Adams' first annual message to Congress, he is pushing for a number of things. He really wishes that Congress would go through and they would work on, for example, the construction of roads and canals. This is a way to actually knit the nation together, trying to create a transportation infrastructure that would allow the goods from the west to be transported to the east, from the south to the north, and would allow for a greater national economy to grow, while at the same time helping the nation to become more dependent upon other areas so that we are a more united country. When you hear the word canals in this case, don't think about like irrigation canals for farming and whatnot, but think instead about large canals in which flatboats could travel and you could carry a great deal of cargo back and forth. So he's pushing for roads and canals. He's also proposing to create a national university. And what's more, he also advocated support for an astronomical observatory. So he's pushing for not just everyday infrastructure type things, but he's also pushing to increase America's stature in both education and the sciences. Now, in some areas of the country, this is going to come across well. This is going to be seen as a brilliant plan. But in other areas, it's not going to be looked at as well. Okay, public reaction is going to be mixed upon this. Most people agreed that roads were a good idea. They thought that this was going to be a benefit for the national economy as a whole, and as such would also benefit them personally. Years later, Ronald Reagan would talk about the economy, saying that a rising tide lifts all ships, and that's the same kind of thing that we're looking at here. The idea is that if the economy for the whole nation was growing, this would help individuals. On the other hand, though, observatories weren't seen as really that important. This was seen as sort of an esoteric sort of pie in the sky. That's kind of a neat idea, but we don't really need that kind of aspect to life. Southerners, for example, knew that if the government did anything, if it was going to build any of this stuff or work on any of this infrastructure, that it would have to continue collecting tariffs. And keep in mind that the South was already very displeased with the tariffs that were in place. They felt that this was basically taxing them, unfairly to the benefit of other parts of the nation. So while the things that John Quincy Adams were really pushing for were not that far-fetched in our minds today, at that point in time, like I said, it was a bit of a mixed reaction. When it came to land, John Quincy Adams was trying to curb the overspeculation of land. Remember, speculation is the idea that if I have an apple today that's worth $1, but I know you'll pay me $2 down the road, I'll load up on as many apples as I can to make as much money off of you when you are willing to spend $2 or $3 on it. Drawback is, if something goes wrong, then all of a sudden I've got a lot of worthless apples. So this is what was going on with the land. And this was not going to go over well with the Westerners. They really felt that this was going to cost them money. It was going to really limit their ability to expand and whatnot. And President Adams was really doing this for their own good. It was something that would try to help prevent future panics and other downturns in the economy. Drawback was a lot of people were looking more at the immediate rather than the long term. When it came to the Cherokee Indians, for example, he tried to deal fairly with them. But the problem was, in this case, the state of Georgia successfully resisted federal attempts to help the Cherokee. And you're going to see coming up in the not too far off future, you're going to see under the Jackson administration what's referred to as the Indian Removal Act, where even though the Cherokee had gone through the legal court system, they had actually worked their way up to the Supreme Court of the United States and had a ruling that they were in the right and didn't have to leave. That was still going to be a problem. So there's a lot of things that were going on at this point in time that President Adams was trying to help the nation, trying to help grow the nation's economy, trying to stitch the nation together and things like that. And while he was going to have some successes, again, it was going to be sort of a mixed bag. Not everybody was going to be overly pleased with what he did. Not everybody was going to be upset with what he did. But sometimes all you can hope for in politics is that you're going to get, not even a majority of the people, but just one more than the other side is going to get.